Up in the morning out of the rack.
Up in the morning out of the rack.
Reading it done with an early attack.
Reading it done with an early attack.
First sergeant rushes me off to chow.
Sergeant rushes me off to chow.
And I don't need it anyhow.
And I don't need it anyhow.
Halo, infantry.
Halo, infantry.
Queen of battle, follow me.
Queen of battle, follow me.
And airborne rangers fight for me.
And airborne rangers fight for me.
Oh, nothing in this world is free.
Oh, nothing in this world is free.
That's correct.
I want to start by saying in America you are welcome to buy whatever you want. I believe you should be able to own all manner of protection in nylon. If you want to look like a super special Delta operator ready to cram down the leader of some failed group in a hidey little corridor, go wild. If you want to, get those nods and flex in a Waffle House parking lot. This includes the pointy end of the stick items too, have at it. Now with that said, it's in most American civilians' interests to get items that enable them to defend themselves appropriately and react to threats, but loading out like an infantryman is not ideal. Building a loadout like an infantryman means fighting like an infantryman, which means you must be resupplied like an infantryman. Being supplied like an infantryman means you have the support elements that enable an infantryman to be an infantryman. You can make fun of all the cringe Spartan vs. Halot comparisons you want.
Spartans! What is your profession?
The reason the US infantryman is feared is because in the US military, being an infantryman with a capital I is all he does. He doesn't need to worry about ammo. It will be given to him when he runs out. He can call for air support. He will be medevaced quickly, because while his plate carrier didn't save him from bullet wounds to his hips, extremities, and outer sections of his torso, it at least shielded his vitals and bought enough time for what would have been mortal wounds to be treated by world-class medical professionals. His buddies have done what they can to control the bleeding, but he's in Doc's and God's hands now. Every American should indeed be a competent rifleman and a man or woman of the trades, but even in the Army, not everyone could be an infantryman. The average person shouldn't load out or plan to fight like one. This is a subtle but very important difference. Stick with me through this. Amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics. Logistics is a very important part of warfighting, and no one is exempt. METTC will always dictate your approach. Without the ability to resupply after initial contact and with no resources or the ability to replenish them, you are finished. If you can't get a magic supply drop from the nearest fob, you are done if all you have is 100 rounds between every member of the squad in a combat scenario. You can completely use up a 210 to 300 round loadout just by breaking contact. There have been firefights between soldiers and large numbers of insurgents that have lasted in excess of 48 hours. So if you've stockpiled enough ammunition, you should be okay, right? You are still limited by storage space, your location, and your pocketbook. Storing enough ammo for multiple days would be a tall order for one person, much more unrealistic if you start expanding the group. Each soldier has hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment and food invested just to train them. That's not even getting into the sustainment part of the equation. I'm encouraging you to think about your own situation here as it pertains to you and your family and your expected threat profiles. So what about the other equipment? I'm reminded of a good quote from Admiral Lindy McCormick. I am tempted to make a slightly exaggerated statement that logistics is all of war making, except shooting the guns, releasing the bombs, and firing the torpedoes. You've got plates, you have the helmet, you have nods. That's great. I do encourage people to purchase these items where they can, if they so choose, especially if you have a business that is the source of your income. 2020's Summer of Love is a great example. You're making your place of business an unappealing target, but you still have to contend with the issue of resupply and the ratio of attackers to defenders. The level of training becomes an issue. You don't rise to the occasion, you default to your level of training. You may be the warrior in your group, and that's great. How about the other members of your defense line? Can you expect your kids, an 18 and a 9-year-old, and their mom to perform an Australian peel with you? Can your 100-pound wife drag you to cover and start controlling your bleeding while your teen daughter is laying down suppressive fire. Home invasions are much more likely than getting kitted up, and you won't have the time to don your body armor and other goodies. Even then, let's say you manage to get nods on. If your teenage son runs into your bedroom because someone is down the hall chasing him and he frantically rushes in, it's not like he has IRR patches that identify him as part of the team. Oh, but I live alone. Now we get to the meat of this meal. A lot of these scenarios are thought of or popularized by mostly single men in the junior military member age demographic. I was a private once. I thought I could fight the world, and for sure many of us did. You need that level of confidence, if not arrogance, in order to act and be decisive when things are getting really cyclical. This cycle isn't new at all, though. It's always been this way. So it's really up to older and more experienced warriors to make inroads and mentor a lot of young guys who may feel like there's a need to be ready for a fight that would look like Restrepo or a raid on a compound. The reality is, fighting like an infantryman requires so much more than just having the right items. If your actual occupation means you do these types of encounters to pay the bills, you're probably getting training for that. If you want to train for scenarios outside of military actions that reflect a more realistic danger, doing an area study and finding out your most prevalent type of crime and who it's committed by will go a long way. If you're trying to prep for unrest and you can't leave the city, have the items that enable you to dig in for sure, but realize the more solitary and isolated you are, the less time you have until your ticket gets punched if you're the target of a mob. It becomes apparent that determining the loadout appropriate for you should be based on your logistical chain. Be prepared for trouble, determine what kind of fight you can sustain, and that will tell you the kind of fight you can wage. It will rarely hit infantryman level. And this is probably the most important point for those with limited means of resupply or medical aid availability. Engage only in fights that you can win outright on the first strike. You can literally learn everything about being an infantryman from the FM online. Being an effective survivor with limited resources in a hostile area requires a lot more than that. Until the next video, be good, stay safe, and have a good one.